All right, Mike here with that'sgoodenough4me.com. We're doing our Who's Zoomin' Who series. I'm with Zeke Cam and Taylor Morden, filmmakers of the Last Blockbuster documentary that debuted on Netflix on the 15th of this month. It is currently the number 4 movie in the United States and number 2 in Canada, right?
Yes, sir.
Number 10 overall.
Fantastic. Well,
I like
big flex.
ping pong tournaments and everything on Netflix. We're number 10.
It's fantastic. Now, big flex to me. I paid to rent the movie on Amazon right before it went on Netflix after reading about some controversy regarding Netflix. So I wanted to just touch on that first. You know, it's all over the web that Netflix originally approached Blockbuster. But if one of you guys could just catch us up to speed regarding that.
Yeah, there's a little bit of controversy, but a lot of that is the internet doing what the internet does. It is true, and you see it in the movie, that Blockbuster was approached by Netflix a long, long time ago, before Netflix was what Netflix is. And Blockbuster famously turned them down. And that led to Netflix just going out on their own and doing what they did. But the misconception right now that a lot of people are shooting around the internet is that Netflix made this movie as like a way to get back at Blockbuster or show them who got the last laugh, when really Zeke and I made this movie because we love movies and we like Blockbuster and Netflix both, and we can all be friends. So
yeah,
yay. But thanks for renting it on Amazon, because that's
great.
We
I
also
hadn't heard much.
What's that?
Oh, no, and yeah, that's actually been my like quarantine resolution. As I started doing these Zoom interviews with artists, I realized that I haven't like paid for a lot of music in a really long time. I haven't paid for a lot of movies in a really long time, and it's just at our convenience. And I started finding out how much an artist makes off of Spotify, an artist that I consider to be wildly successful, you know. So yeah, that's just a big flex on my part. But I hadn't heard about the second part. I hadn't heard about the internet growing story about it being Netflix's turn. That's kind of funny. But I enjoyed the documentary very much. I was born in '84, and I grew up in rural Nebraska, so it was just all ma and pa. So Blockbuster was just this mystique to me.
the fancy store.
Wanted to show my street cred while I'm here.
Right.
But yeah, now fast forwarding to, you know, man, I'm 37. I collect video games, and so the entire experience was brought back to me. This mystique, this feeling of mystery. I think that I made my parents take me into some Blockbusters when we visited some bigger cities, knowing that I wasn't even going to be able to rent anything, right? Just to get the experience. And the record store in my little community tried to borrow little things like the concessions and stuff like that. But Blockbuster was like the mecca, and it was on every commercial, you know. So I just wanted to kind of talk about the branding of Blockbuster in general, just what made it a titan to you guys. Zeke, you can start.
Well, so I'm older than you guys, so I didn't get to grow up with Blockbuster. By the time I was really going to Blockbuster on a regular basis, I think I was in college. So it's not quite the same thing. I would still have to walk the aisles knowing I wasn't going to be able to afford to rent anything. But we would use it as like a way to hang out with friends, like a library that you could talk really loud in, you know? And then by the time I was working in Hollywood at studios and stuff, we would go on our lunch hour or go in the morning and get a bunch of videos for reference or just to goof off, and then bring it back to the studio and just throw it up in the theater, and everybody would stop working and come watch whatever we'd rented. And it was what you did.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that streaming media has tried to portray, you know, the cover art of a movie in a similar fashion. That's the closest we get to like walking down the aisle, but it doesn't feel the same.
No.
Right,
I brought my son to the store here in Bend when I first started working on the movie, and he was 7, I think. I think he was like 7 when we started, and he's walking down the aisles, and he was just completely like amazed. And he picked up a DVD and he turned it over and he goes, "There's stuff on the back." And
Yeah.
that's kind of it's if you haven't experienced it, it's a big deal that you can pick it up and touch it and turn it over and see what's on the back.
Oh, for sure. And part of being an adolescent boy was like, there was a corner of the video store where they had those Faces of Death movies, right? And you weren't supposed to go over there. You'd sneak over there. Even just the cover of Evil Dead 2, I remember used to like freak me out, just walking past it. Or going to the adult section and snickering until the college student working. It's like, fuck off, kids. Like, get out of there.
Yeah.
So Taylor, can you kind of run with that?
Yeah. I mean, I love the experience of being in a video store. It was there aren't a lot of specific fond memories, but it's like become this one fond memory from childhood of like being in Blockbuster, browsing the aisles. And like you were talking about with the cover art, I think it's really interesting because now, you browse and they've got these little thumbnails and that's fine. And then a lot of the platforms will play the trailer or play a clip or something. And that's crazy to me because I remember the very early days of the internet, like trying to download a movie trailer on Real Player or something. And it would take like 2 days. And I finally got that Mallrats trailer and I could watch it. And it was like 200 pixels by 300 pixels. And like we used to gamble. Like you'd go to the video store and the box art was cool. It was like a painting of this crazy thing. And there's a dragon and a bikini lady and a sword and a thing. You get it home and it's just garbage. Like these movies, they put all their money into the box art because that's all you needed to do back then. And now it's like you're browsing, you can watch the trailer, you can watch the first 10 minutes and it's, nothing because you've already paid for your subscription or something. So there was, I think, more magic back in the day. You would find things that you would never watch these days because maybe the trailer wouldn't hook you or something. But if you had to go, and for me, like the video store when I was a teenager was half a mile away and I had to walk and return like bottles and cans to have enough. And it was the gas station too. So I'd go in, return the cans, get the VHS, walk it all the way back home. It took me like an hour to go get a tape. I was watching that movie and I was probably watching it 3 or 4 times, whether it was horrible or not. I saw Beastmaster 2 5 times in a weekend because what else was I going to do? So it was kind of a magical time for movies because we have those relationships now with these movies that nowadays, no kid is like spending their whole weekend watching some Netflix movie over and over and over again. There's too many options.
Yeah. Taylor, you probably saw Beastmaster more than the guy who made the movie.
Yes, probably.
And that was, my memories were like my dad would take my brother and I to the video store on Friday and we'd get 2 Super NES games, right? And then they'd go to the bars on like Friday and Saturday. We were home alone. So if those games suck, it was just like the one-hit wonders in the 90s. If you bought that one record, the Hootie and the Blowfish record, like you're fucked. You just had to deal with it. You had to listen to it. It was all you had. So I'm going to do something I haven't done before. I'm just going to randomly grab a Super NES title. We're going to find out whether or not it sucks because it probably does. And I probably bought it because I have a great memory associated with just like being stuck at home with my little brother. So let's see here. What do we got? Oh, yeah. Pit Fighter. I mean, it's street fighting, right? So this has got to be fucking kick-ass, right?
A lot of Pit Fighter back in the day. It's not good. Yeah. It takes everything that's bad about Mortal Kombat and everything that's bad about Street Fighter and makes it worse somehow.
So now imagine you're 9 and you have that game. It's Friday night. Your parents are like, all right, see you later. Have fun. Like, you have to make it work. And I think that, not to get like old man yells at cloud or something, but I think that carries over to a lot of the different ideals that people of our generation have. And maybe why we call millennials lazy and blah, 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 blah. Because you get to just, one of the reasons I started collecting games was because I had the Raspberry Pis and all the things everybody else had. And I realized I would play a game for, seriously 3 minutes and just be like, nah, next one, next nostalgia. And I realized, oh, if I buy it, maybe I'll get home and sit down and play it. And it worked for a year until I was consumed. But that's great. I like those answers a lot. I was a computer database programmer for a long time. So I really liked the part of the documentary where they talked about just the old technology still working. I used computer software that went obsolete in '97, and this was a job I was working like 2 years ago. And I think that kind of speaks volumes about, what old school technology really carried, the analog stuff. But goddamn, when she opened that computer, how dirty that computer was, I was like screaming at my television, my like inner IT guy. So I had to mention that.
I can still smell the dust from that day of filming. Like I can feel it. This was before we knew about wearing masks to go places. Had we known, I would have had one in my pocket and I would have been able to breathe. But that dust is gross.
Yeah.
A buddy of mine's an IT guy, and he sent me a picture of a computer because a girl that was working from home at their call center said her computer sounded funny. So she brought it. She's been working from home for a year. She brought it to the office and they opened it up and it looked like that. He was like, where the hell do you live?
The cat rumors.
Yeah.
Gross.
So I originally...
If those break, she has to build a new one out of spare parts. It's not, it's crazy.
We called that at my old telemarketing place. We called that cannibalizing the computers, like taking working pieces and making it happen. Now, I had first heard about the Last Blockbuster. I assume maybe you were probably already making the film, depending on how long it took you. But I follow Cinemassacre, the Angry Video Game Nerd, and he did a little mini documentary where he went there and with his buddies, and they rented a DVD and they watched it on the hood of his car, and then they returned it, and then they drove back. But I kind of wanted to talk to each of you just about your knowledge of the Last Blockbuster and what it felt like to go visit that place.
Well, it's right down the street from where we live, so we still go there. We actually go every chance we get to go. Yeah. I thought it was closed, and Taylor came over to watch a movie, and he said, "There's like 12 Blockbusters left," and I said, "There are?" And he said, "Yeah, and one of them's in our town." And I was like, "What? The one, is it anywhere near the abandoned one that I've driven by 100 times?" And he goes, "It is that one. It's not abandoned." And so I think the next day I brought my family and we all walked around like I'm in a time warp. It was pretty amazing.
It's been really great to see, because it has been about 4 years, almost to the day, since we started working on the movie. And so we watched it go from one of 12 and kind of quaint to, by the time that YouTube video you're talking about came out, it was the last one in the world and everybody was talking about it and people were traveling from all over to come to it. But we got to see that transformation and film it. And like, we were there, not to be like all hipster, but we were into the Last Blockbuster before it was the Last Blockbuster, before it was cool.
That's great.
Seeing what that did for Sandy and the kids that work there and for the store, their sales were dropping for sure, but because they became the last one, they actually, until the pandemic, they were doing better than they had in a long time because they were very popular and they have an online store and they're, doing all these new things. But watching them go from like, nobody cares, there's a Blockbuster, only movie nerds are excited about it, to like, being on the Ellen DeGeneres show and now being on the top of Netflix, and just seeing what that's done for Sandy and for the store has been really cool. Just as, you know, we're kind of wrapped up in it, but we also kind of get to watch it happen.
Yeah, when we started, Sandy was like, you want to make a documentary about this? And we're like, yeah. And she's like, no one is going to care. And we're like, well, maybe that actually is possible. But we care, and hopefully somebody will care. And then once it got closer to them being the last one, it was very clear everyone was going to care.
Yeah.
And there's been, you know, throughout my life, there's been oldies and 80s flashbacks and now 90s flashbacks. And nostalgia has always driven people in kind of like a drug or something, you know.
Yeah.
But I think that just the overall switch from analog to digital across the board, all platforms, I think that nostalgia has become even more of a drug. So I think that's what fuels this ideology. And it's what...
I almost feel like it's moved from being a drug to being medicine. And certainly during the time of the pandemic, it's gone from a fun street drug to a prescription.
Right. Can't live without it. But also, you know, Blockbuster, it wasn't in the nostalgia zone when we were starting. It had only been closed for a couple of years, and people weren't ready to be like remembering it fondly. Like over the course,
people who were like, Blockbuster.
Yeah.
Like when we posted to our social media that we were going to do a documentary about Blockbuster, I'd say every single day there were a handful of people saying, I still owe them $150 in late fees. They can go screw themselves. And we'd be like, you're the one who didn't pay them.
Right.
Why are you mad at them?
Right. Screw the bank. I'm not paying my credit card bill. What?
Right. That's exactly what it was like.
But that's what's so beautiful about the situation, right? It's like, you know, we're talking, you know, buy local, support local, you know, fuck the big box chains. This big box chain has become a mom and pop store like before our very eyes. And I think, especially, the last year, we've been trying to support local restaurants as much as we can. And so that's great. And, you know, to go back about, you know, not sure how many people besides big film buffs were interested in this Blockbuster. You had a wide range of guests on the documentary to, you know, kind of tell their story. Personally, my favorite was Jamie Kennedy, just because I got to see the real Jamie Kennedy versus his character in Scream, who was this like fanatical movie store guy. So could you guys kind of talk about how did you acquire some of the guests that you have, and what was it like working with some of them?
Well, Jamie specifically was a friend of a friend. One of my best friends is an actor, comedian. He was in a bunch of stuff, a bunch of movies and TV shows and things. And his wife was the opening act for Jamie Kennedy, who tours around doing stand-up. And he just happened to be on our list because of that scene from Scream. So I said, hey, can you ask him? Will he do it? And he did not sound interested at all. Like, he made us work real hard. He wanted to change like word here, word there in the release form. And like, he wanted all the questions in advance, like being super difficult, which seemed peculiar. And Taylor and I were like 50-50. He doesn't show up for the interview, even if at his house, by the way. And we're like, he's going to not, I'm halfway thinking he's just not going to show up after it took us months to secure him. And then not only was he there, nicest guy in the world, and he was pranking us because we didn't know that he had been a member of the Blockbuster team, and that basically if he hadn't gotten that commercial series, he wouldn't have stayed being an actor. It like basically he had decided, if I don't get anything soon, I'm leaving Hollywood. So he had that whole story planned. He knew he was going to tell us that story. He definitely wanted to do it. Since then, he had helped us every step of the way. He's been amazing. But, you know, he likes to play jokes on people.
That's great. What about you, Taylor?
What about me? I like Jamie Kennedy. He's my friend. I talked to him today. He just watched the movie and said he really enjoyed it. Because, you know, he waits for things to get trending on Netflix before he'll before it, I don't know if this is really a movie until a million people have seen it, you know. So
no, that was so my takeaway from Jamie Kennedy. I love his work. My wife and I are like huge, well, we were until our child started watching TV with us, but we used to watch that Criminal Minds show all the time. And for me, like a huge there's a huge moment in an artist's career is when they guest as a murderer on Criminal Minds. And I think there has to be some sort of an inside joke about it. Like George Costanza plays a character with like long, silky white hair, and it just looks like George from Seinfeld. Jamie Kennedy has this awful criminal character, and it's this like mecca of his career as far as I'm concerned. Some people might say like jump shark. So I was happy to see him again and just hear him talk with his own words instead of thinking of him as this like terrible character written into a crime show. But yeah, I get that. You know, I asked Taylor on Facebook Messenger if you guys would do this with me. I do this by like badgering people on Instagram. It reminds me of like booking DIY tour with my punk band when I was a kid. So I know what it's like to just like day of open my Zoom and just like sit in my room by myself.
Yeah, we did a lot of that too. You know, Jamie was like Zeke said, a friend of a friend of a friend, and a lot of people we found that way or through, you know, connections of connections. But a lot of it was just me going on Instagram and sliding into somebody's DMs and being like, you remember Blockbuster Video? Do you want to talk about it? And I think we landed some pretty cool people because Blockbuster was so familiar and everybody had these memories. Like almost nobody didn't have a story of like, oh, I love Blockbuster. I would do this and I would do that. And like even Greg from Smash Mouth, I was filming him really for the ska music documentary, but Zeke was there and we were like, well, this guy's just a cool character. Let's talk to him about renting movies. He's got some of the funniest lines in the movie, and he's just like the guy from Smash Mouth.
We're like, we probably won't put it in the movie, but since we're set up, let's ask him. And then he was awesome, so he's in a lot of the movie.
That's great. That's actually a nice pivot because I was going to talk to you about the Pick It Up Ska documentary, Taylor. One, I rented it and really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Two, as someone that's like collecting artists to interview, I was like, how the fuck do you get that guy? How the fuck do you get that guy? So I wanted to talk about the documentary, just the overall production of it, and what role you played. Did you play in a ska band?
Yeah, I've played in a lot of ska bands. A lot of ska bands.
Let's hear some names
of bands I played in. That's all right.
Yeah,
I'm Googleable. No, I played in a few. The most notable was a band called Pocket Face that was based out of Eugene, Oregon, but no one in Eugene, Oregon really cared. So we went to Japan and we were on a major label and MTV Japan, played all the big festivals and toured there a few summers in a row, put out a couple records and did that whole thing. And then we'd come back to Oregon and play for 20 people at a dive bar. So it was a weird way to do it. But then I've played in a bunch of ska bands off and on since 1998. It's when you're a trumpet player and you want to do cool stuff, it's like the only cool thing I think that you can do. Like marching band is not that cool. Jazz, I think, is cooler now than it was when I was a kid. But yeah, there was like the symphony orchestra and there were ska bands, and I went that route.
Fantastic. Yeah, and that was the part that I really enjoyed about the documentary, was just this moment, because I remember it happening in my 8th grade class. That was when Real Big Fish like hit in my little rural Nebraska area, and so suddenly like some of the like kind of dorky kids that just like faded in the shadows. It was like, you play saxophone, and suddenly they were like the coolest people in school.
That was not my experience of it from the other side. I was not the coolest kid in the school. They all thought I was dumb. But, you know, in Japan, I was on TV, so it was worth.
Well, that's fantastic. No, and that's all too, and following ska music, especially as it's continuing to go, the one constant is that the horn players are just rotating and rotating and rotating. And I think it just goes to show, Aaron Barrett has decided that he's going to make this a career. He's going to do whatever he needs to do to keep it going because it's all he knows, right? But it's a very difficult, very taxing thing. As a father and somebody who takes like joint supplement pills and shit now, like I can tell you I couldn't live in a tour van anymore. So it was some really good perspective from a lot of artists. So I would recommend that. Zeke, I just found out that you did some writing for the Weird Al show.
Yeah, I was
in 97. Okay, so that was a show. I'm a huge Weird Al fan. I wasn't able to watch that show because it wasn't available on any channel that I could attain in my rural community. So I actually forgot all about my desire to watch it until I read it today. And now, of course, I have to go like hunt it down somewhere, right?
They put it out on DVD at some point.
Okay.
I remember because I got
can you
tense or something. Or
yeah. Can you elaborate on working on the show? What it was like? Did you get to work with Al directly?
Oh yeah. So I was the head writer of the show. So they brought me in because the head writer they had wasn't working out, and that was before they started. This was basically in pre-production, and I did a lot of development. That was like my thing, is to develop stuff. So they had me come in. I finished up the development, and then we went to series, and it was great because like some of my favorite comedians would come in and out of those rooms because Al was friends with all of them, and I get to meet them, and they're all very different in person. They were all just super nice, and like the stage personality was put on the back, which was great. And Al was super nice to work with. Hard worker. It's the only place I've ever worked that someone arrived before me, because I'm usually the hardest worker in a room. And but Al would always be there before me, and I would always try to be the last person to leave. But it'd be 8, 9 o'clock at night, and I'd be like, I gotta go walk my dog. My poor dog, I can't outlast Al. Al's like the hardest working guy I've ever met. It was great.
That's great. Yeah, I think what's great about artists like him that have been around as long as they have been is that that he's a genuinely good person. We've seen enough FaceTime with him to know that he's just a fantastic guy. In a world of finding out that some of our heroes are awful, he's a really good egg. Moving on, Taylor, I wanted to talk about.
Can I give you a little bit of trivia that probably nobody knows? Someone worked on the show who has gone on to be insanely famous, and this person was just the script supervisor. So made sure that script supervisor just makes sure everybody has the latest version of the script. Basically, it's a little more than that, but it's not a creative position. And she would go around telling everybody that she's going to be super famous. And we were all like, whatever, Melissa McCarthy.
Oh, wow.
That's awesome.
That's crazy.
Script supervisor. I love it.
Thanks for dropping a little nugget on my show.
You're welcome.
Taylor, I haven't watched your Back to the Future documentary because I'm an asshole, and I thought it was the other Back to the Future documentary on Netflix that I already watched. So I wanted you to tell me what it's about, because I don't know.
Well, it's not a documentary. So early in 2020, a little cold thing was going around, and people started getting sick, and the government said we should all stay home and stop doing things. And not the government, the scientists. I listened to the scientists, and so I stayed home and didn't do any of the things. Flash forward to right now, I still haven't done any of the things. But early in quarantine, you might remember that it was scary. We didn't know, like people were still like Lysoling their groceries and wiping down a banana. and all these, just, it was crazy. And there was a lot of stress, and people like us who are creative and, you know, work in groups outside of the home and make art and do things. We're all stuck at home, not knowing what to do. A lot of us have fancy cameras and other equipment and didn't know what to do. And so I kind of like just got it in my head that I would put together this internet project and invite people to do shot for shot recreations of Back to the Future Part 2, just using stuff in their home. So don't go out, you know, and try to find a DeLorean, although some people had them in their homes, I found out. But like, it led to all this awesome creativity of people who are stuck at home, you know, recreating Back to the Future 2 with puppets made out of bananas, or sock puppets, or I did my scene stop motion animation out of cardboard boxes, and animators did really awesome stuff. There's actors in it. Some of the actors from the original movie did cameos in it. And I put it all together and just put it up on YouTube. We had a watch party, and it was a really nice thing for all these quarantine creative people to do together and kind of, I don't know, feel like we were still human beings. It's weird to talk about the beginning of the pandemic now, because it's still bad and still feels weird, and I still have all this anxiety, but it was crazier then. And I don't know why, because at that point, like in April of last year, I thought for sure it'd be over by June, so who cares? But
yeah,
it wasn't over, so we recreated Back to the Future 2 and put it up on the internet, and then a lot of people watched it, and it was really fun. And now it's like on my IMDb as a real movie. So a lot of people are writing articles about the last blockbuster from the director of Project 88, Back to the Future 2, which is hilarious because it's not a real movie. It is a YouTube collaboration. But if you're watching this on YouTube, just go watch it. It's fantastic. It's hilarious. There's a lot of little kids playing Doc Brown to the best of their abilities.
So funny.
That's great. That's great. I look forward to watching that. Yeah. And so I did a whole bunch of little mini projects, micro projects over the last year, just out of the same like type of boredom. But I'll never forget. I was scrolling through it, kind of reliving my year. My daughter's birthday is on April 6th. So I went to April 6th of last year, and I said, you know, the entire month of March to April, I posted, 30 times in 30 days. Like, woe is me. This is so terrible. I had been out like a week, I said, happy third birthday to my daughter. I'll never forget that month that we spent in isolation together. And now we're pretty much canceling her fourth birthday. We're going to have some facet of a birthday. But yeah, I really enjoyed everybody's panic projects, is what we can call them, between March and June. One of my favorites, if you saw the members of the State reunited and did their Porcupine Racetrack song, that's fantastic. It's really good. Ken Marino's big aria as the priest is probably the top moment of the whole thing. But I'm a huge fan of that show. Actually rewatched it over the last year. Made my wife watch it all. She never even heard of it before. So that's great. Yeah, I look forward to checking that out tonight. Aside from that, and obviously giving you a platform to promote the Last Blockbuster, I wanted to ask if you have any other projects in the works, if you guys are planning on working together again, or if after all of this you hate each other's guts.
Well, we still hang out kind of as much as we can, considering there's a pandemic going on.
Yeah, I think we've talked on the phone more. I've talked to you, Zeke, more on the phone in the last year than anyone else.
Yeah,
It's a lot of work putting out a movie. Right now we're working together. I don't know if you know, but promoting a movie is as much work as making a movie, as it turns out.
More sometimes.
Yeah. We've got ideas for stuff and we're working on stuff, but who knows when it's going to be before we can actually make things again. And it's bad luck to talk about things before they're real,
Absolutely.
Yeah, they might not happen,
Well,
like that alien invasion that's scheduled for May.
Yeah.
Slap them cheeks. All right. Well, check out The Last Blockbuster on Amazon Prime. You can rent it, or you can check it out on Netflix if you're a cheap ass. But I wanted to thank you guys both for joining me today, and I hope you have a great rest of your night.
Thanks. And if you want a piece of physical media, you can buy our DVD from the Last Blockbuster store. BendBlockbuster.com, if I got that right.
You did. That was the first time. I love it.
Oh, yeah.
And they've got, T-shirts and hats and all that stuff. And as Taylor so eloquently puts it, a kid in a blue shirt will touch your stuff before they put it in the box. It actually, it'll trap a little piece of Blockbuster air in there. It's guaranteed.
Yeah.
So let it sit for 15 days before you open it.
And it's the best thing you can do if you care about helping the small business that is Blockbuster stay open, because that's pretty much all their business now is through their website. They're not renting the DVDs like they used to. So, help them, help us, buy movies, pay for art if you feel like it. Don't if you don't. And we don't care at all if you rewind or not, but be kind.
Yeah, definitely be kind.